I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messages God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator has sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives. Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Today, my guests are, starting all the way down at the far end, is Michelle Altenberg, who's the coordinator of the Inside Out, a group art exhibit. Then next to her is Michelle Hurling, who is producer of Minds Interrupted. And on my immediate right is Parry Noskin, who's the program manager of Ideas in Psychiatry. And today's prophetic topic is all men must be treated equally. This phrase has extracted from an address on the teachings of Baha'u'llah given by Abdul Baha to the Theosophical Society at their headquarters in London, England, on September 30th, 1911. The complete statement reads as follows: Equality and brotherhood must be established among all members of mankind. This is according to justice. The general rights of mankind must be guarded and preserved. All men must be treated equally. This is inherent in the very nature of humanity. So what we're going to be talking about today is all men must, and that's, the generic men and women must be treated equally. We cannot have a disposable society. God did not put us here on this planet not to take care of each other. So these three lovely women are all having components of what is basically an awareness raising on mental health issues, what they are, how do we deal with them, how can we get involved with them. And so I just wanted to put that qualifier out. We're going to start Michelle A as opposed to Michelle H. You want to introduce yourself a little bit, tell us a little bit about why you're doing this and what's going on?
Fine. My name is Michelle Altenberg, and I am a artist, an exhibiting artist, and an art educator in this community. And I recently realized that there is a great need to take a really serious look at those that have mental challenges, physical challenges, and try to connect them to a meaningful pursuit of creativity. So this show called Inside Out, which my students came up with that name, and I think it's very profound. And from inside comes their creativity to blossom and connect with their spirits, and giving them a purpose and a connection in life so they can experience that creative force and perhaps have a more meaningful life. So it'll be a wonderful exhibit. We want to see as many people there from our community in support. Since it is Mental Health Awareness Week, we have other wonderful people encouraging other events. It's a rich mix of many events for the week. This is October 10th, 5 to 7 at El Museo. We'll have a silent auction. People can look at the work. If they love the work, we hope they'll support the work, support the artist, and put a bid in on the work. And the folks that I'm working with really can't even fathom, that they are an artist and now their work is being up in exhibit and possibly being sold. So it's a very profound experience.
Let me jump in here, let you all know that what you're watching periodically throughout the show, we're going to be flashing images of these paintings on the screen. There's about 6 images. That's not the whole show, it's only a small part of the show, but just to give you a little bit of flavor as to what kind of art you're going to be seeing. There's some incredible things in the show. We didn't want to do all of them because we didn't want to distract too much for what the message we're here to carry today. But just so you know about those images and why you're going to be seeing them. Michelle H.
Michelle H. I am the producer of Minds Interrupted, Stories of Lives Affected by Mental Illness. I conceived of the idea in 2008 after taking a family-to-family program with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Santa Fe. This is a program for family members who have a loved one with an illness. And in the middle of taking that program, I realized I wanted to advocate for more than my brother, who does have an illness. I'm about 15 months younger than he is, and he grew up from the age of about 12 or 13, having some very strong behavioral issues that turned out to be a mental illness. So I wanted to advocate for more than him, and I thought a way to do that was through the monologues. And bringing 7 people from our Santa Fe community together to sit down and write, and we just finished our first writing weekend yesterday, and then learn to edit their story and then find a way to present on stage. And we are so blessed to have the Lensic sponsoring this.
And I'm just going to add along with that, and I think we've talked about this before, but my sister was part of the original presentation of Minds Interrupted that first year. She was one of the presenters as well. You know, this is, and talking about it is about what we're going to get into a little bit later, is getting rid of the stigma that's attached to it. You know, you get a lot of extreme negative publicity because one person every now and then with some really deep issues goes unnoticed, untreated, unhelped, and winds up doing some disastrous things. That is not what mental illness is all about, and we'll keep talking about that. Perry, you want to?
Sure. I'm from the University of New Mexico Department of Psychiatry, and I'm program manager of something called Ideas in Psychiatry, which is based in the Office of Community Engagement. And our whole mission is to help educate the public. We do it through lectures primarily and small group discussions. And the whole collaboration with the group in Santa Fe, we're also partnered with Doorways, Santa Fe Doorways, Nueva Light Enterprises, Suicide Finding Hope. I mean, a bunch of people and groups are all coming together for this Awareness Week next week. And it started because we're bringing a speaker named Dr. Maria Oquendo, who is a leading researcher in suicidal behavior. And we've had the program in Albuquerque for 3 years, but we're moving it up to Santa Fe. So we wanted to partner with people in the community to make sure that it would be relevant all over.
And bringing it to the mainstream.
We're doing it. We're doing it. Absolutely. We're very excited.
That's
it's really
cool.
wonderful.
I don't want to get too clinical here. Can we, without getting clinical, I can handle some of the clinical part, define mental illness and maybe talk about how it comes about and how do we start to recognize it? Anybody? You want to? Shall I start?
Well,
Okay.
according to NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, mental illness is defined as a disruption in a person's thinking, actions, or feelings for a long period of time, and it disrupts their ability to be working in the world or having relationships in the way that, and I hate to use this word normal, because it's like, what is that?
It's a cycle on my dryer.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying, you know, I mean, and I like the part of that definition that talks about a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we live in an instant gratification society, and grief and sadness are part of life. Mm-hmm. And I think all too often people equate that with depression. Mm-hmm. If it's not treated clinically, it can turn into depression, but there's situational versus chronic. And what you're talking about is how do we address the chronic?
And one of the things you just said, and thinking about you too, is that in a society that's into instant gratification, we also make snap judgments.
Yes.
And so if we see someone who's acting a little differently than what we're accustomed to, we create a whole narrative around that may or may not be accurate, or may or may not come from a point of understanding and education.
How do we, besides what you're doing, how do we get across the message of normalization?
Education.
Okay.
We need to educate our community and stand up strong and try to break the silence of stigma. And there's a lot of families out there that are confused with, their loved ones' behaviors. They don't know where to turn. I would like to just say to think about NAMI, and if we could give that phone number, which is 466-1668. NAMI really saved my life and gave me the tools to deal with a loved one. And that's the reasoning behind this whole week, is to educate our community. We have a small community, but our society, I believe, is still hung up with stigma and unable to come to terms with how to deal with a loved one. And I think education is the key to open the door. And then unfortunately, we don't have institutions, special hospitalization for people with problems, and they end up in the jails many times. We have 20 to 30% of our folks in jail who don't belong there, and we don't have facilities. I worked at Camarillo State Hospital as an art teacher during the time that they closed that down. And where did these dear folks go? They went to the streets. A lot of them are still on the streets. In our progressive society, it's a crime we don't have a place to help people, to motivate people, to educate people. So I think the root system of this whole week is to finally stand up and have a voice.
Let me pop in here for a second, because one of the things you just said, there is a study in Mexico prisons, 87% of the incarcerated prisoners, that's redundant, isn't it, are there behind substance abuse. That's huge. And I think part of the problem comes from, being a clinician, there is a clinical definition that defines the illness. So the U.S. government, the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association all recognize substance dependence, whatever the substance is, as a mental health disorder. Yet we have a society that treats it as a crime. So we are cross definitions and cross purposes, and that's why a lot of these people are falling into a place where they don't recognize the health issues, because they're seeing what they think is the cause, which is really just an effect.
Well, we've criminalized mental illness. There is a big, huge gray area, and we need better definitions so that we can help our community.
You wanted to say something?
I did, because a lot of people, so you think about mental illness, and what I've noticed is when people talk about it, they think of something over there. They think about, those people who have substance abuse issues, or those people in prison, or those homeless people. But NAMI, and I think NAMI has statistics around this, that 1 in 4 adults is going to be touched by mental illness in some way in a life, in any year. So if you think about that, there are 4 of us here. Every person is touched by, it's no longer an other. It is touching every single one of us. Sometimes it manifests, and it manifests in substance abuse. Sometimes it manifests in prison. Sometimes it manifests in the kid who's scared to leave the room or has aluminum on all the windows because somebody's in his or her brain. Sometimes it manifests with a child who commits suicide because he or she doesn't see any way out. So it manifests across the board. And part of the destigmatization is that it's all of us are touched by this. It's not out there, it's right here, right now.
Yes, and to get back to the topic, we have to treat everybody equally. We can't just discard them. That that they're human spiritual beings. They're here for a purpose. I think part of their purpose, from my own spiritual perspective, is to teach us compassion and mercy, which I think is something that society sorely lacks. But I want to get back to, I don't want to keep preaching here. I can get into that. I didn't become a minister for nothing.
But what you're talking about is recognizing the value that each one of us brings to our community. Because my passion is community building. And community building includes bringing everyone in and bringing in people with mental illness who are adding to our community. And people don't see it in that way yet. People do not realize that people with mental illness are intelligent, they're loving, and have a lot to offer.
I wanted to, let me clarify just a little bit. You're more the big picture therapeutic aspect. Both of you are doing, well, are demonstrating what people are capable of and carrying their story, which
I
is...
don't think that's accurate.
No, it's not. I couldn't
It's
come up
not.
with the right definition, but...
So you think about University of New Mexico. It's education, okay? So
what
I'm
I was
in the
looking for. Yes.
I'm in the Department of Psychiatry. By the very nature of being in a Department of Psychiatry, you're every day working with people who have mental illness, and you're striving toward mental health. But the ideas in psychiatry, at the very heart of it, is education toward destigmatization. So we're all, I think of this whole collaborative, and think about probably 7 more people around the table with this collaboration, like Santa Fe Doorways. We are all around this table approaching it from different angles so that we can hope to touch, just like your theme, so that we can hope to touch anyone where he or she is at.
Let me try to clarify my question then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Both of you went out into the field, into the trenches, so to speak, and had to recruit people. What was that process like? How did they react to it? How did you find them? How did they feel identifying themselves as, I've got a mental health problem?
Well, for Minds Interrupted, this is our 10th production. So we have been throughout New Mexico, and we've also been in Baltimore and St. Paul and San Antonio, Texas. And we're really excited. It's been 5 years since we've been in Santa Fe itself. And we bring 4 people who are family members who have a loved one on stage, as well as 3 people with an illness. And those numbers might shift depending on the production, so that people can recognize and can hear stories about the impact of mental illness on these 7 people from various perspectives, from the perspective of being a parent, from the perspective of being a sibling, from the perspective of actually having bipolar disorder, from the perspective of dying by suicide. We have a mother who will be on stage who will be sharing her story about her son dying by suicide. It's a heart-wrenching, heartwarming story that talks about, she shares about her son's bipolar disorder. We have a young woman who is 41 and just found out 6 months ago, she was just decided, I think I need to go get a diagnosis, and went to see a psychiatrist and was diagnosed, and said everything started falling into place for her. She finally understood why her life has been so out of control. And this is an intelligent, creative person. So it is really wanting to put a human face on mental illness, rather than the sensationalized news stories that are talking about tragic events that happen in our communities. That's generally the only time we seem to hear about mental illness, is when those types of tragedies happen. These are the backstories to the crisis that everybody hears about when they hear about mental illness. Or our hope is that, for sure.
Okay. How did you get people to contribute? How did you qualify them? Would they qualify themselves? How did their diagnosis or impression of what they were manifest in their drawings?
How
Good
did
question,
it Yeah, that's a big question. The students that I'm working with, most of them have never held a pencil, a brush, have never done any creative work at all. And so they're experiencing a whole new world for themselves. And the things that they're connected to, whether it be a beautiful church in the middle of a countryside, or a pink pig flying through the sky, whatever it is an important connection for them. And it's bringing up all kinds of wonderful connections for them, which I see builds confidence, builds purpose. I've been an educator for 15 years, and to see that as a teacher is one of the beautiful blessings when people turn around and have a meaning to their life. But this is just a piece of the whole big picture with what Michelle's beautiful work is doing, and Pari's work, and the Santa Fe Doorway. There's people out there, they're going to be listening for a piece. And it might be my art piece, it could be suicide that their loved one's thinking about. So they can connect with the information that is out there for them. It could be a family connection for NAMI, the first time that the family has to get connected to a support system. So we're coming here with an art show, with wonderful monologues, with a forum, but under all of it is education, and to send the word out to our community that there's help and that there is a way to get involved and not turn your back on the loved ones who desperately need help, who end up in our jails. I mean, our society, that's a big picture to look at. We're so technologically advanced, and yet do we have a special place for people who have special needs? They're few and far between. It doesn't make any sense. It should be an integral part of our society that we help each other, not turn our back. How many of us have been in the market and somebody isn't acting just so? Most people don't even interact. They're afraid because of the news media and etc. So my calling is, it's time to step up to the plate. Mm-hmm. It's time to have a face, like Michelle says, put a face on this stigma. And we need government officials to look at this so that we have better housing for people. Where do these loved ones go if they need help?
You talk about putting a face on it. Are the artists going to be at the opening?
Yes, they will be. We'll have to caravan a bit and pull resources together and figure out a way to get them there. And then again, that's a great question. With mental challenges, this could be too overwhelming for some of these folks. They may not get there. But that isn't important. Their work will be there, and hopefully the folks there will meet the artists, but some of which may not be there for other reasons. They'll see this incredible show and meet the whole community that's in support of mental illness.
Did you see any transformation from the beginning to the end of the project for the artists?
Well, one thing comes to mind. I have one student who has a breathing problem, and she told me that when she's doing her art, she doesn't think about breathing. And it just went into my heart and stayed with me that she doesn't have to think where her next breath is coming from, because she's in this focus of creativity. So that may not seem like a lot to most of us who take our breaths very easily every day, but for her, the next breath is a challenge. So that's a piece, and that should be a mirror or a reflection on all my students, how it's changed their lives.
You look like you wanted to say something.
Well, as I listen to you, it's so incredibly moving. And I was thinking again about the collaboration and how it sort of started around suicide and trying to get people, so mental illness has stigma, and then the subset of suicide, because a lot of people who commit suicide, and again, I don't know the exact numbers, but a lot of them have mental illnesses. And, so we started with it, but it's all combined. I think I hear about the visual art and the sort of the narrative theater of Minds Interrupted. The lecture that Santa Fe Doorways is going to do with Dr. Larry Dawsey around immortality. And then, Ideas in Psychiatry, we have this more academic lecture. When we first started Ideas, we weren't sure if anybody was going to come to any of our talks because we thought the stigma was so high that people didn't even want to be identified going to a talk about mental illness, because who looks around the room and, oh, you're here, why are you here? And that kind of thing. Now, we don't know what Santa Fe is going to be like. Now in Albuquerque, we get pretty good crowds for this, but it's a very, of all of it, although I won't say that. I was going to say of all of it, it's probably the safest way. You just walk in. I think Minds Interrupted is too, because the lights go down and nobody sees, nobody sees you there. Nobody's asking,
Although
why
we've
are
had
you
the
there?
same thoughts that you had.
You had the same thing?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
The board in 2008 said, why do you think people are going to want to come and see this? They don't care about people with mental illness, and they don't want to be identified. And all I could look at them and say was, I don't know, but I think it's time.
Let's get
So
talking
you got
here.
good turnouts even at the beginning.
We had 350 standing room only, sitting in the production booth, turning people away. In Baltimore, we filled the center stage with 517 people, standing room only, sold out. I'm still overwhelmed by it. I'm overwhelmed every time somebody says, yes, I'll write my story. Because it takes a lot of courage to write your story and get up in front of your community and share it. Because this isn't like a traveling show, it is within each community. We reach out through NAMIs, National Alliance on Mental Illness. We reach out through that organization to let people in the community know that we're there and we're interested in talking with them if they have interest in sharing their story.
You talked about suicide. Short of somebody with a debilitating, end-of-life chronic illness, isn't anybody who commits suicide demonstrating mental health disorders?
I can't say. I don't know. I'm not going to say yes. I have, experience in my own life of some people who committed suicide, and I don't know if I buy that. I don't know. We have an expert, Dr. Janet Schreiber, who is part of our group, who would probably have been able to address that. I know my own theories, but I can't say.
That's why it'll be important if somebody's out there watching this and connecting with this. Any of the events they'll come to, they can connect with somebody who can help them and guide them to the right person.
Yeah.
And let me make an announcement here, because we're throwing out a lot of names, a lot of phone numbers, we're flashing numbers, we'll be giving contact info and event info at the end of the show. If you didn't catch it, my contact info is on repeatedly during the show. At the end of the show, rolling credits will have my contact info. If you've missed anything, want to know anything, you haven't caught the numbers, contact me. I'll be happy to give them to you. I want to Go ahead.
I'm so sorry.
You don't have to be sorry.
We also, on ideas in psychiatry is just easy for people to remember. So if they go to if they just key in ideas in psychiatry and they go to the website, right under our speaker's picture, they can click and they'll have all the events there too, just as another way to get at that information, because that way we can make sure everybody's represented too.
Wonderful. I want to talk a little bit about the impact of mental health issues on society, but divine synchronicity. In my email, there was all this ton of email waiting for me when I came home. There was this one Hank Hughes' organization, Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness, or something, I forget the exact. I'm on his mailing list. They sent me this study, and I want to read this. Albuquerque Heading Home released a new study that showed that helping our most medically vulnerable, chronically homeless people really is the smart way to do the right thing. The study, which was conducted by UNM's Institute for Social Research, has compared costs of clients 1 year prior to housing to 1 year in housing through the Albuquerque Heading Home initiative. Some highlights from the study show that permanent housing resulted in overall savings 1 year pre and post housing was 31.6%. Decrease in ER visits was 36.2%. Decrease in hospital inpatient costs was 84%. Decrease in hospital outpatient costs 39.1%. Decrease in jail costs 64.2%. And a 78% retention in program after 12 months. So, I mean, the impact on homelessness, which is an aspect, I believe, a lot of times of, again, I take a very broad definition of mental health, you know, in that, or the lack of mental health, so to speak. It manifests in a lot of different ways. That's why I made that comment about suicide. It's about devaluing of self and isolation from society, so that so many people are homeless because they have a mental health disorder that was not diagnosed, wrongly diagnosed. They have self-medicated and got poorly diagnosed. Yep. And they just start to give up on life because they're not getting results, the treatments aren't working, or, and I don't want to get too, maybe I do. You know, we cannot just deal with this pharmacologically. No. Because the body will build a tolerance to almost any substance we put into it, and so it's going to always stop working. So the pharmacological aspect of the healing has to take place coinciding with the therapeutic aspect. But I think we've become all too reliant on the instant gratification we talked about to just take a pill and that's the end of it. And that's only a stabilization to get people someplace where they can actually work out some stuff and learn how to really deal with stuff, not just, you've got your pill, leave us alone. So, go ahead.
Well, everything is so interesting to me, but I think that when you can quantify things, we're very happy. I mean, as a society, we're happy. And a study, I mean, part of the way that we're going to address stigma is by having these kinds of studies that show that it's good economic sense, it's good development sense to do the right thing. And I think it's now starting to happen. Your view on mental health is a public health view about people's mental health and well-being. And that's hard to quantify, but once you can, then you can make the argument, I think, more,
the fact that we have to quantify it in financial terms, this shows to me how lack of spirit the society has. I got a quick story. Church of the One God is the organization, my umbrella organization for my ministry. It's a 501c3. It's not a congregational ministry. My business card has 6 major religion symbols on the top. the first person I handed this to, like a dozen years ago, looked at it and said, "Phil, you're missing one." Exactly. I go, well, I can't be. What am I missing? He goes, "You're missing the dollar sign."
Oh my
And
God.
that to me is the commentary on this society. You know, we as a society are insane, I believe, because we are trying to fix what's broken inside of us with something outside of us. And that can never work. And that's why I like that concept of inside out. It doesn't come from the out and fix us. It comes from the in and goes out when we spread it. So it's not about me taking a pill. It's not going to fix me. That's going to de-escalate me, maybe help me for a little while. But if I'm not doing more than that, I'm just going to be caught up in a cycle that's going to eventually lead to something really drastic, impacting my life and the people who love me. So where was I going with this? You started it.
It's just sort of, well, you said there's the broad picture, so I gave you the broad
I
picture.
don't think it's one piece. It isn't just the medication that a person needs. They need a total approach
Yes.
to their health, life skills, having a place to go and integrate with other people. I mean, it's a much bigger puzzle. It isn't just the doctor who hands out a pill. It's got to be bigger than that. I spoke to a psychiatrist recently who has a vision, a very beautiful vision, to start a healing center that integrates the medicine, the pharmaceuticals that are needed, but a place to learn some skills on how to be an active member of our community. And it's huge. I pray that there's some way this can get off the ground, but every community needs a center like that, not just a park and rec, not just a play yard for the children. Those are important pieces too, but to really focus in on the needs of those people who need help. And this is a profound, maybe in the future you could have him on your show to talk about his vision, because it's a great connection to what we're all doing here. And that's what our community needs, a support system for folks who need help.
And I think one of the first things we need to do is just start to come out of the isolation around this. It's the isolation of living with a mental illness, either as someone with an illness or as a family member who has a loved one, is huge. People just will not talk about it. People will not. We have a father who is going to be sharing that, I think it was 12 years ago, his son was showing some really strong symptoms, but he was not. His wife saw it. She was willing to name it. He was not. And he's very honest about it in his piece. And he is doing this because he wants to say to people, please don't do what I did. 3 years ago, I finally embraced my son. I mean, he loves his son all along, but 3 years ago, he finally admitted to the fact that his son had an illness, and it has changed his life as well as his son's life.
Don't you think when people get scared of things they don't understand? I know that's a very simple statement, but like listening to what you're saying about the father, or I was thinking about Kay Redfield Jamison, who came out and spoke with ideas, and she was talking about sort of depression as opposed to grief and sadness. And she was saying, you know, if you're sad and grieving, people run to you. If you're depressed, people run away. You know, that's one way you can sort of tell. And I think it's because a lot of people, we're scared. We're scared that mental illness might be contagious. You know, ooh, I know somebody who has schizophrenia, I might get schizophrenia. Or, oh, you know, I mean, we're scared of that because we don't understand it. We're scared of being labeled. We're scared of being put in a box and being isolated. I mean, all of these things. And, you know, you were talking about education being at the base of it. I think it's really important to try and educate on whatever level you can, because maybe that'll start dealing with that fundamental fear of something different.
And I think the news media really confuses the public. It's a great confusion when a horrific event happens, how they entangle it in with the mental illness, and then of course gun laws, which is another hot potato. So there's a lot of confusion in our community.
We're going to bring somebody in February. Ideas is bringing somebody in, a social epidemiologist, about violence and mental illness, about the myths around it and the
There's
realities.
a great myth
So I'm
around
really
it.
excited about
That's
that because
wonderful.
people are thinking about it all the time.
And because we ignore it, we don't train the people who need to be trained, which to me is like somebody who walks into a school and shoots up people cannot just come out of nowhere like that.
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of people, administrators, teachers, counselors, and classmates who have ignored or were not aware of what the symptoms are. And then all of a sudden it blows up and it's like, well, we got to put in more metal detectors and we got to do this and we got to do that. But we don't talk about why aren't we training these people to recognize the early symptoms, which people do not come into any place and shoot it up out of nowhere. It's a building process. We don't hit crisis just like that. That does not happen.
But if you put in more metal detectors and you have this sort of superficial response, what's also going to happen, and maybe you two can speak to it too, is the very people who might need help, the very people who might be helped by early treatment or early identification are going to go underground.
Yeah.
They're just going to go underground.
The metal detector, all that is a plastic Band-Aid for the real issue. Those are Band-Aids. We need a lot more than that. Michelle has a wonderful program, if you could speak about it, that's going into the schools. That's where it begins, to educate the young children. Maybe you could tell us
Sure, I'd love to.
about that.
You were reading my mind.
I am psychic.
So there's a program called Breaking the Silence that Desiree Woodland brought into Albuquerque a number of years ago after the suicide of her son. And she says, I did not believe my son had a mental illness. I thought he might have just had a lack of faith. And after he suicided, she started going into the schools because she recognized what the importance of education for teenagers, because 14, a lot of times some symptoms begin, just symptoms, begin to show up. So we've been going into the Santa Fe high schools using Minds Interrupted as a platform because we want to go in and talk with students and invite them, high school students, to come to this performance at no cost so that they can hear these stories. And we have an hour-and-a-half program that we go in and share a DVD with 4 teens who have a mental illness and speak about schizophrenia and clinical depression and suiciding. And we share that video as well as the interactive lessons to find out what they know about mental illness. And then at the end, we find out what they've learned during that hour and a half. And it's just in an hour and a half, it's unbelievable.
Well, I would take that one step further. As a clinician, every 2 years, I have to have 6 CEUs, continuing education units, which are basically 6 hours of ethics. I would suggest that every teacher and every person working in the school should have a mandatory early diagnosis, early symptoms. Look at these things, not just this person is a troublemaker, get out of my room.
Right.
Look at all the
obscene.
bullying that's going on in schools, and we address that. There's probably a lot of issues connected to mental illness in that arena, and that's being looked at. And we need to start early, not wait till someone's in their late 20s and 30s when we think, oh, now I realize what happened. There's children in school that need help, and where are they going to turn? So this is a wonderful program. It gives them some place to turn to. So You know, there's so much happening in the school system. Kids are in cliques, they bully each other, and this is another piece that has to be addressed. Just like in the bigger society, years ago we never spoke about cancer. It was very quiet.
Right.
You never said a peep. We've gotten over that, but we're still talking about cancer, diabetes, and these issues. We need to really be open to talk about mental illness and put it in the same platform as other diseases.
You know, one of the things that I'm thinking about is that old, oh, it's all in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yes,
come on, just buck up. You know, just get over that. And because, you know, it's like cancer and diabetes, we accept that you don't necessarily see it. But mental illness, yes, it is in the mind, and we don't accept that it's as real
Right.
as anything else, and that it's a real
we have
condition.
the societal concept about self-will,
That's
Yes.
right. That's
which
very
does
true.
not work, because first off, most of this stuff is happening in areas of the brain that are not cognitive. So they're reactive. You're not thinking about it, you're just reacting. You know, that whole thought process is out the window. And again, we don't understand this or embrace this as a society.
But if we could just even accept that this is biochemical in nature, it is in the brain,
Yes.
it is in the organ, just like other organs of the body get cancer, as well as the brain, mental illness is happening in the brain. The brains get sick.
Yes,
Bottom line.
exactly.
And the medical field is just starting to look at brain imaging and so forth. I mean, it's new, surprisingly. I mean, it's behind in all the other illnesses, but they are looking at it.
I mean, and there's an amazing amount of research out there about how spiritual practices help people with mental health disorders. It was a kind of old study. I think it was done in either North Carolina University of North Carolina, or Duke University about 5-6 years ago. They studied meditation and found it to be the #1 promoter of neuroplasticity, which is creating new brain patterns, you know, to help heal the dysfunctions that's going on. We're going to start to run out of time. I want to make sure we get to talk about everything we get to talk about. So why don't we just walk our way down? Michelle A., if you could slowly give out your information, dates, times, phone numbers.
Okay, the art exhibit, and I graciously invite everyone in the community to support this. Inside Out, first time for these folks to show their work. El Museo is the location. It's 5 to 7 on October 10th. And there's another very important event early in the morning that Pari will talk about, doorways, that is also helpful. But this art show, it's our first time out. Michelle's been doing this wonderful work for a number of years, and so we're the first time out of the gate with the art show. So we need the community to support us.
And
So
doesn't the art show, I mean, that's your like opening, doesn't it? It keeps running. It doesn't end at 7 o'clock.
no, it'll run that weekend till the 13th. It'll close Sunday evening on the 13th. So if you can be there for the silent auction, which will be a lot of fun, there'll be paintings, sculpture, three-dimensional jewelry, knitted items.
You're going to have music.
We're going to have wonderful music with Matthew Andre and some wonderful snacking food. And then if you don't get to that event, it will be at El Museo till Sunday the 13th.
Okay.
I just want to add in also, if you don't get to the silent auction and you go afterwards and you see a piece you want, you can still purchase it if it's still available.
Thank you.
Yes,
That is
but
a
you
good
want to
point.
get there
Yes.
at the opening,
Yeah,
because
that
it may
one's
not still be
fun.
available.
It might not be.
We'll leave it
That's
hanging
right.
with a little red dot on it. Says,
So, Michelle, Minds Interrupted, Stories of Lives Affected by Mental Illness is a one night only at the Lensic Theater on Wednesday, October 9th. It starts at 7 o'clock and it ends at about 8:30. There will be a meet and greet afterwards where you will be able to talk with the presenters and you will be able to pick up information about NAMI, about the nonprofit organization that umbrellas Minds Interrupted, the Compassionate Touch Network, as well as being able to pick up information about the art show and about ideas in psychiatry and about Santa Fe doorways. And come. I mean, these are 7 people from your community that are just wanting to share their story and have gone through a transformational process and come out the other end with greater understanding and pulling some pieces together that they didn't realize they had inside of them that they want to get to share.
Beautiful.
A few events. First of all, Larry Dawsey with Santa Fe Doorways. Dr. Larry Dawsey, who received the prestigious Visionary Award that honors a pioneer whose visionary ideas have shaped integrative health care and the medical profession. He will be at the Unitarian Universalist Church on the 10th at 11:45 for a free program. Also want to mention that Santa Fe Survivors of Suicide meets the first and third Thursday of the month at the same church from 5 to 6:30 for free programs. And now,
Before you do that, just those who don't know, church is on Barcelona
thank you.
and Cordova. No, it's not Cordova. Don
Galisteo,
Diego.
I think.
Galisteo.
It is
Galisteo in Barcelona.
And Barcelona.
Okay.
Thank you
Go ahead.
very much. And the last thing, which makes me sad because she'll be in Albuquerque on Thursday night, so I don't get to come to the
Yeah.
opening. I'm very sad about that. Is Dr. Maria Akendo is going to be speaking on suicide risk factors and strategies for prevention. She will be at the CCA Cinematheque. That is on Friday, October 11th. It starts at 6 p.m. and it is free. And if anybody needs information about all of the events, again, you can go to Ideas in Psychiatry, look at Dr. Akendo's picture, click underneath, and there's a PDF with all the information there.
And our Lensic production is $15 general admission, $50 for reserved seats, scholarship tickets available to anyone, no questions asked. And you can go to NAMI's website, www.nami, N-A-M-I, NAMISantaFe.org, or call the Lensic for tickets.
Okay.
Did we get it all in?
We got all that information. There's so much going on.
We've
Yeah.
got 5 minutes left. Let's talk about what we started to touch on. People watching the show, they now, wait a second, I may fall into that category. Where can they go for diagnosis? Where can they go for services? How do they hook up to this, whatever support system is out there, how can we hook them up to it besides showing up at these events?
Well, NAMI will be the first
I'd
stop
say
for
NAMI's the
this.
first step.
And I gave the phone number earlier.
Let's do it again.
And that is 466-1668. Also, I'm a facilitator for NAMI, and I have started an afternoon at noon meeting for those that need help in finding the right doctor or the right psychiatrist or are finally stepping out to get help. It's scary, but this meeting takes place at Hillside Market. It's on Old Santa Fe Trail, the second Wednesday of each month. And I'm there if you just want to come in, get some facts, sit in, see what's happening. It's the beginning.
Okay, so we know we've been flashing your phone number. Do you want to give it out?
Was it flashing?
It should have been on the screen.
Okay, the home, my number would be 500-2417.
Okay. And again, anybody who's missed any of these numbers, contact me. I have almost all of them. If not, I'll get them for you and get back to you. Any others besides NAMI? What else do we do? I mean, somebody's in a crisis. What do they do?
There is a crisis hotline that they can call that is usually in the beginning of the phone book. At least it used to be. I just don't use the phone book anymore.
I have that. I have that number if you need it.
Yes,
It's
go for it.
820-6333 is the crisis line.
820-6333? Okay.
So there will be somebody there that can speak with you and will be able to help give you some resources.
And I was just thinking, you know, I'm in Albuquerque, so I can't speak to the Santa Fe resources as much. But there are support groups, such as the Survivors of Suicide and NAMI. And so also, not just for the people who are in crisis, but perhaps family members who need information or want to go, that's another way to get at information as well.
With NAMI's phone number, you're going to get a voicemail. We are a completely all-volunteer organization. And so the voicemail, you will leave a message and somebody will get back to you within 24 hours. So if you are in crisis,
Call the crisis
call the
line.
crisis
Yes.
hotline.
Okay. Final thoughts? We got a couple of minutes left. Anybody?
Thank you. Thank you for giving a voice to this whole collaborative event and letting us come and talk about it. And sort of, I see your part is helping to begin this dialogue too in the Santa Fe community. So thank you for
You've
your
become
piece in it.
Part of our collaborative.
You're collaborative. You're around the table now.
Which, by the way, we want to mention Mary Costello.
Absolutely.
Who is the woman who somehow, and we're still not sure, brought this collaborative together. Because we were just pieces floating around, and we have come together as a result of her
And Cheryl
vision.
Brown,
And Cheryl Brown.
who has a site specifically with suicide Finding Hope. Another one.
Yes.
So, and Janet, who happens to be working cameras today too,
Yeah.
Janet Schreiber,
Yes.
Multi-talented.
the multi-talented.
So I think I want to say mental illness is like any other illness. It's just we don't talk about it the way we talk about heart disease and cancer. It's the brain is sick, it needs some help, and if we can reduce the stigma, then I think people will begin to seek the help that is needed and will be able to receive the help that they need.
I thank you all. You're doing wonderful work. Blessings to
So
you
are
all.
you.
Blessings to you. Thank
I
you.
thank you all for tuning in. I want to leave you with this thought. There was a fairly famous Jewish rabbi who once said, "What you do to the least of me, you do to me." We cannot ignore people. We cannot have a disposable society, a disposable culture, a subsect of any of that. If we're not whole, we're not whole. It's that simple. So hopefully you're a little bit inspired. Get out there, go to these events, learn some more, and help make your community a better place to live in for everybody, not just for you and those you think are close to you who are okay. So until next week, thank you for tuning in. Blessings to you all. I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.